As time goes on, more and more albums become forgotten in history, and it's a crying shame. I feel like God put me on this planet to tell you guys about these albums, so that's what I'm going to do in this video today.
But you and me ain't no movie star. What we are is what we are.
In 1971, Alice Cooper hit the big time with his album Love It to Death. He remained one of America's most polarizing musical figures throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, but a lot of his albums from his golden era are forgotten. The biggest example of this being 1977's Lace and Whiskey. Now, one of the things I feel like Alice Cooper should probably pride himself on was his wide amount of genres that he would express in his albums, and Lace and Whiskey was probably the biggest culprit of this. My personal favorite song off of this album is No More Love at Your Convenience, but other good songs on this album include the title track Lace and Whiskey and the very non-Alice Cooper sounding You and Me, which hits right here.
Tommy, can you hear me? Can you feel me near you?
I've mentioned in a previous video that this album should definitely be a top 10 album of all time, and the fact that it's not recognized as one is a crying shame. I'm just going to leave it at that.
I have tried in vain, never had success. So it seems my life is nothing but a mess.
I feel like this rapper kind of lived in the shadow of Eminem, and he kind of brought that onto himself because he literally pretty much lived in the shadow of Eminem's music. As somebody who doesn't really listen to rap all that often, I have to say that Success Is Certain is actually a really, really good rap album. And a lot of the songs on the album express a lot of emotions that I've felt in my life. The best song on the album being Merry Go Round. It's actually way better than ABBA's version that was released in 1973 or something like that. I don't like ABBA's version of the song, but this version is way better, and it's probably the best song off of the album. One of the most forgotten metal albums, and yes, I said metal, of the 1980s is Wasp's debut album, self-titled, released in 1984. Almost every single track on this album is amazing, and people never mention it at all. I'm going to say the best song on the album is Love Machine, but even I'm not really confident in that answer because there are so many songs on the album that are just amazing. I mean, I Wanna Be Somebody and Sleeping in the Fire, I mean, those two songs contend for the top spot as well. It's definitely worth a listen.
Of you, throw me through the mountain.
Before Fleetwood Mac reached their immortal status of one of the best bands of the 1970s, there was Buckingham and Nicks. Now, while Fleetwood Mac was still around and sort of thriving in 1973, they didn't really grasp onto their pure sound that everybody, including myself, loves until 1975. In 1973, the band that contained that immaculate sound was Buckingham and Nicks, or Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. The best song of this album is Crystal, which is way better than Fleetwood Mac's version. Their version is fine, but nothing tops this original version off of that album, and it is a shame that it is not on Spotify. Like, oh my god, dude, are you serious? It's not on Spotify. I had to settle for the Fleetwood Mac version.
Once you sank like the Titanic, the incident it left your life damaged, and that's when I panicked. You thought you had it locked when you ain't.
Another very underrated rap album is Knock Madness by Hopsin, released in 2013. I don't care what Anthony Fantano says, this album is very, very well written, and it proved that Hopsin is one of the best lyricists out there when it comes to rappers.
Come on, honey, I got no money, but I love you so much. Come be without you.
Before Crocus found their one-hit wonder-like success with Screaming in the Night in 1983, they were a basically unknown rock band from the 1970s. To You All was released in 1977, and the album is actually very good, which is surprising because it is the only good Crocus album. The best song off of this album is the very not Crocus sounding Move It On, which is just, I can't even explain it. It's a very unique, weird sound that just works. It's a shame that Crocus never made any other albums like this, because like I said before, and I stand by that statement, this is the only good Crocus album.
You've done it all.
If you're from the UK, you may have heard of this album and this artist. If you're not from the UK, you probably not have heard of this album and this artist. Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel released The Best Years of Our Lives in 1975, and the album hits hard. I don't know how else to say it. The album hits hard. The best track off of the album is Make Me Smile, which is a little bit more on the softer side, but it still gets those happy feelings inside of you, and that's all I can hope for when listening to a happy album like that. I'm really sick and tired of people giving praise to the 4 big albums that Pink Floyd released: Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall. Because before that, Pink Floyd released a plethora of amazing albums that nobody talks about. The one I'm going to talk about the most here is Atom Heart Mother. I could do a whole separate video on Pink Floyd's earlier work from the 1960s and 1970s, so in this video I'm only going to talk about the one. And Atom Heart Mother is arguably one of the best Pink Floyd albums out there, and it's a shame that nobody talks about it. The 3 albums that Pink Floyd released prior to Dark Side of the Moon get no recognition, and it's a shame because they probably have the most musical substance out of all of the Pink Floyd albums. Wait a minute. That's it. People just don't understand the ambitions of those 3 Pink Floyd albums. Come, let me show you. People like listening to the 4 big Pink Floyd albums because the messages are easier to understand than the 3 prior albums. Prior to Dark Side of the Moon, Ron Geeson, David Gilmour, and Roger Waters wrote albums like Atom Heart Mother that were too musically complex for the slow minds of the human race. And as time goes on, those 3 early albums continue to become more and more obscured by the broken auditory cortexes of today's society and their inability to improve their thinking and understanding abilities. It's why in 2020 the youth doesn't even take the time to listen to Animals, let alone understand the meaning on it. All of these realizations put together basically just creates proof that the human race is collapsing on itself due to the sheer stupidity of people, and is inevitably soon going to die because the human race is constantly moving backwards.